Hello, everyone, and welcome to the River Cruise Masterclass. I am so excited you are here with me today as we continue our Rhine journey. So I got some comments last time about I just did, all of the castles, but I didn't talk about the lore, which is probably the most important part, and I apologize. I just wanted to share all of them, and I may have gotten myself a little excited. It happens to the best of us, all right, no judgment. So with that, if I can get my notes out, because God forbid technology wants to work for me, it never does. Fun fact. Okay, so today I'm going to focus on 8 really interesting history, lore, things about the Rhine River. I am recording this on a podcast as well as on YouTube and other things like that, so you can see the visual and my face. It's a lot, I know. And next week, we're going to have a special guest. I drove 3 hours away because I have someone whose first river cruise was the Rhine, and it's my mom. And she's a hoot. And so we're going to be talking to her about some stuff, but I'll talk about that later. Anyways, okay, so here are 8 interesting lores about the Rhine Gorge as we're continuing through our Rhine journey. So the first one, I don't know if you heard about it, is the Lorelei Rock and statue. So basically, the Lorelei Rock is a steep 433 cliff along the narrow winding stretch of the Rhine near St. Gorsheim. So the Rhine narrows here, and basically it creates dangerous currents and strong echoes. And so back in the day, sailors had a real reason to be cautious. So according to the legend, Lorelei was a heartbroken maiden who jumped to her death, and the gods turned her into a siren who sang atop this rock, luring sailors to crash against it. It was first written about in the 1800s. Heinrich Heine's famous poem, Die Lorelei, popularized her story. In 1983, a bronze statue of Lorelei was placed near the rock. It is 16 feet tall and gazed out over the Rhine River, and she has flowing hair, which I don't have anymore, and a mournful expression. And so to this day, some locals say she still appears on foggy nights where she's brushing her hair with a golden comb. So in the real world, there have actually been tons of treacherous accidents through this bend, including more recently in 2011, there was a tanker that crashed. So, and I'm sure those sailors heard her mournful cry as they crashed. But when you go on the Rhine River, they will actually play the Lorelei song as you're going through that treacherous bend. So it's really interesting to do that sort of thing. So one of the other sections is one of those interesting historical pieces, which is the Rheinfeld Castle. So it was built in 1245 by Count Dieter V of Kassenblagen, which I didn't research how to say all these names, just like last time. And it was built there basically to control the tolls and build his territory. It became the largest castle on the Rhine, as we had talked about before, and it spans 5 times its current size at its peak. So what you see now, it was 5 times larger when you're going through it. It withstood massive siege in 1692, and with only 300 defenders against 28,000 French troops. It was partially blown up by Napoleon's troops in 1797 during the French Revolution. Today, it is a sprawling ruins. It is walkable with tunnels and ramparts and even hidden chambers. People do report that they hear strange sounds in the tunnels, random cold spots, and whispers in the wind, especially in the old hospital wing. There is a local museum with medieval weapons, torture devices, and maps of the fortress that you can go see. And if you want to be a little adventurous, I would say go at dusk for those sunset views and the real creepy factor, because I feel like all those people who hear the ghosts are probably at dusk and imagining things like I would, for sure. And so that's one of those just interesting castles. I think it's really cool how they were able to withstand the siege with only 300 defenders against 28,000. That is almost 100 times less, and they were able to defend it. But if you think about it, if someone is defending their home versus the person who's just being paid to go to war, you have different motives, right? Look at the American Revolution. So another castle that has an interesting family curse and legacy is the Rikestein Castle. So it was built in the 11th century, and it was destroyed in 1253 due to robber barons, and it was rebuilt and fell again into ruins. One of the most famous owners was Dietrich von Hoffens, and he was a robber knight who raided ships and resisted church authority. In a dramatic end, he and his 9 sons, which he was busy, obviously. I'm curious if they all had the same mom, was captured and executed. And the legend says that their spirits were doomed to haunt the castle to this day. Locals say that you can still hear 10 sets of footsteps at night on the stone staircase. It was rebuilt in the 1800s, like a lot of the other castles that we have talked about during the Romantic Revival. The person who rebuilt this house, Baron Kirschpuss-Pirelli, was fascinated by its darker history. It is actually now a museum and hotel with suits of armor, moody candlelit halls, and offers one of the most immersive castle experiences with the stories and settings that you can go see. I didn't know this about the hotel, and I'm interested if it changes your opinion if you'd want to stay at that hotel. I feel like I'd at least want to do one night, just to see if it has that same feel. I have stayed at a castle when I went to Ireland, and I think it'd be really interesting to stay at more. I plan on doing it when I go to Scotland, but I don't want to mess with the spirits either, Like, if they're happy where they are, why am I to interrupt? But if it's like a Outlander thing where I can find some, guy from the 1700s, but he's going to go to his death. Anyways, I digress. One of the other castles that has an interesting lore to it is the Rheinstein Castle. It was built in the early 1300s as a customs port by the Archbishop of Mainz, and it fell into the ruin in 17th century, like a lot of them did, and was one of the first castles that was restored in the 19th century Rhine Romanticism movement. When the Prince of Prussia bought it in 1823, he turned it into a fairy tale fortress. This is the kind of place I want to stay. We love a fairy tale. The castle includes a drawbridge, stained glass, a chapel with the prince's own tomb in it. It has a secret garden terrace and has one of the most iconic views of the Rhine. It is one of the first castles to inspire the entire medieval revival movement across Germany, which, as we talked about last week, had over 20 to 30 of the castles that were affected by that. And so the next one is actually just going to be talking about the Rhine in general. So the Rhine wine vineyards, which is something that I'm really passionate about. My next newsletter is actually about Rhine River cruises, and there is a huge growing demand. You can go with your local winery. There's also wineries that go on board river cruises, and you do like a sampling of wine from the region and wine from New World versus Old World and how it compares. But in the Rhine vineyards, it traces back all the way to the Roman times, which I always said I liked history and I was good at it in school until I start thinking about all. And I was like, I had no idea that the Romans were in this part of Europe. It makes sense, obviously, but my mind just has a hard time connecting it. They brought actually viticulture to the Rhine region. And one of the most popular grapes that you'll find in the Rhine is the Riesling grape, which it thrives in the steep, slate soil of the gorge, and it benefits from the sun that reflects off the river and keeps it hot. During the Middle Ages, wine was actually a currency, and the monasteries and the castles were used for trade and prestige. Every town actually had its own Weinfest, which is basically the word wine in German, in late summer and fall. And currently you can do the wine hikes, there's tasting routes. Some castles even offer like wine pairings with historic meals. You can, as I said, talk about doing it with the river cruise because they will do the river cruise will be focused on it. It is so much fun. So you have that as well. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So, and the last piece, or one of the next pieces, honestly going to be like just the geological marvel, which is the Rhine Gorge. So if you think about it, this gorge was carved millions of years ago and likely due to a tectonic uplift and glacier movements. I mean, that sounds so technical and scientific, but it's really just so beautiful to see when you're there. It's so interesting to just see how rivers just naturally move through things and how it's kind of done. The river cuts through soft shale and slate, creating steep cliffs and narrow channels. You think about like the microclimate, it has the rocky slopes, which are warm and quickly heat and hold heat, which is ideal for those grapevines and some rare wildlife if that's something you're interested in. And legend has it where the gods created the gorge to separate feuding tribes, which is a poetic nod to the dramatic cliffs. And if you listen last week, you had it where one side of the river had the Romans, the other side had a different sort of nomadic tribes. And so, again, as I said, it isn't just scenic, it's a landscape with ancient power and literally forged by pressure and time. If you want to imagine yourself on the edge of the Rhine River, you can feel the wind, and when you're sailing down it, realize that you are looking at millions of years of Earth's memory and kind of think about like what it had to take to create this, because it wasn't actually man-made. Now, the last one is an is an interesting sort of tale, and I think it's, even if it's not true, I'm going to say it's true. It's karma. And we love a karma tale. I have fallen into the Taylor Swift trap, and I love all the karma that is her life at the moment and her getting all of her records back. But anyways, I digress. So you have the Mouse Tower, which last week we talked about the cat and the mouse, and it's the Maustrom. But basically, this tower sits on the tiny island near Bingen, and it is part of the old Tool system. According to the legend, Archbishop Hatto II was a cruel ruler who hoarded grain during a famine and burned the poor in a barn. He mocked their cries as the squeaking of mice until the real mice came for him. Fleeing to the tower, he was devoured by a swarm of divine mice as punishment for his actions. Now, the real story, the real history, the boring stuff, right? The tower was built in the 13th century and likely used as a customs control, but the tale stuck as it warns of the abuse of power and the certainty of divine retribution, which my friend Kevin always says is retribution. So today, the tower, it looks peaceful. It is one of the most iconic ones that you'll see because it is actually in the middle of the gorge. But the story is among the darkest in the Rhine legend book because the archbishop is true and he was a cruel leader, but how he died might be a little exaggerated. But he still got his the karma in the end and how he died. So I just want to say, like, we at least have that as our part of it. So as we continue, I want to kind of talk about what we're going to be talking about next. So next week, we are going to have someone come in and talk about their experience on the Rhine River. I'm going to do a little interview, ask them what they thought about it. They've been only doing ocean cruises, the experience comparing the two, what they thought about the Rhine and the excursions that we did. And then we're going to move on to the Northern Rhine. So I'm going to be talking about Rudesheim, the Black Forest, and where the trip ends. And then we will be doing 3 days and what I would do in Zurich. So we have a total of 3 episodes left for the Rhine. And then we will be moving on to another mini series that I have been working on, and I can't wait for you guys to hear about. So thank you again for listening to the River Cruise Masterclass. I cannot wait for you guys to listen to the next episode. And I just want to say I appreciate all of you guys listening so far. And if you do have any questions about river cruising or just travel in general, please don't hesitate to reach out. I have a Facebook group right now, and we do have a promotion going on where if you join our Facebook group, I have a fun little document on Rhine versus the Danube. What's the best river cruise for your first one? And if you sign up before June 17th, you'll be entered to win a really cool carry-on suitcase. It's a really nice one. I actually spent some good money on this one. And you can also join our Facebook group. You get a second entry, which is River Cruise Planning and Tips with Sydney. So anyways, thanks again for listening, and I cannot wait to come back for our next episode. Thank you.